I want to talk about reparations, and it's something that I wrote an article about for the Queen's Jewish Link. Hopefully they'll print it because it may be a little controversial. It's an emotional issue, so I mean some of the things I'll say are facts, and I do have an opinion about it. And I have a short amount of time, so hopefully we'll get some time to have some exchange about it. Okay, so the first time reparations was brought up is, of course, after the Civil War, and that's the famous 40 acres and a mule. And it really should have happened then. That was precisely the right time, and it was the moral thing to do, but unfortunately, the country or certain forces, fell short. And okay, so recently it was brought up, an African-American scholar by the name of Ta-Nehisi Coates brought it up, and that caught fire among the new presidential candidates, and for reparations. What is meant by that? Cash, in other words, money, and an apology. The amount of money varies according, to the researchers. Some economists and researchers who study this, it varies anywhere from $6 to $14 trillion is what they propose. Just as a reference point, the Germans paid out to the Holocaust survivors up to until about a few years ago. They paid out $100 billion, and out of a pledge of $240 billion. That would be the completion. Now, the apology. Okay, so we know that this. After 150 years, this is a different country than was at the time. I don't know whether they teach it in school much. I know the new thing is to stress what the evils that this country did, but the fact of the matter is that 600,000 lives were lost during the Civil War. Obviously, some of the people losing were on the wrong side, but so here's how it breaks down. 11 states out of the 35 fought for slavery. They were the Confederacy. There were 4 slave states.
They never should have abolished slavery.
There were 4 slave states. Slave states that actually fought with the Union, fought against the other slave states. In other words, they had remorse. So okay, so it was basically 11 states fighting 24 states. 24 states fought for the Union side. Now, it was not just, by the way, it was not just a white man's sin. Hardly anyone knows this, but Native Americans also owned slaves. They owned 1,500 slaves. And among the 320,000 free black men, about 15% of them actually owned slaves. And that came so it was about 4,000 slaveholders that were black, and they owned 13,000 slaves. Okay, so obviously it was a vicious war, and the Confederacy, thank God, lost, and a lot of their wealth was squandered during the war. After the war, it's like, when you always go on with the wind, the South was impoverished. So the question is, from among those who still had money, after 150 years, 6 or 7 generations, what, the inheritance as it spreads over different generations becomes thinner and thinner, if it exists at all. All right, now, it is argued that we already did pay reparations, and it wasn't called that, but the war on poverty, which reputable people say was aimed a lot for poor blacks, was a tremendous expense. The Heritage Foundation estimates that since Lyndon Johnson put in the war on poverty in the 60s, that $22 trillion was spent. And what was it spent on? It was spent on housing, food stamps, welfare, that type of thing. And I just want to say that legitimate scholars such as John McWhorter, who is from Columbia University, has said that this can be considered reparations. So now, the reparations that they're saying now most probably would not be in the form of cash payments to individuals. It would be similar to what the war on poverty was. Housing, education that was different, that was not really stressed in the war on poverty, and child care, which was not stressed back then. So the Heritage Foundation, which came up with a figure of 22 trillion, says that really based on census figures, we're not that better off in terms of eliminating poverty than what we were then. Now, the candidates, most of the candidates now running on the Democratic side went to Al Sharpton. Now, the reason I bring this up is because I feel that Al Sharpton is part of the problem. The whole negative idea, the whole negative emphasis on militance and confrontation, as opposed to what Dr. Martin Luther King, which was for unity. Dr. King did unite this country, even though there wasn't pushback at the time. And Dr. King, what he accomplished in 10, 12 years is so much more than what these civil rights have done in the last 50. So the truth is that as an honest observer, you would say that throughout the history, throughout the country's history, the white man has been an impediment towards black society's progress. But the truth is that I feel that after Dr. King was assassinated, a whole different trend set in, and it was symbolized by the riots that just erupted all over the country. And actually, riots have still, to this day, have not been condemned from the major civil rights leaders. I mean, they may say it, but it's not really emphasized. And we've seen that in recent years there were riots in Baltimore and Ferguson. And just as an example, lots of negative things came in. Drugs, and even a lot of the culture absorbed that negativity through. You could see it through rap music, the negative angle on women and country. Yeah. Okay. So the idea is that I think we should, reparations are fine in the form of what we've been talking about, but the main thing is to try to change the culture, that the way Oprah and other hundreds of thousands of black Americans became millionaires is through a positive outlook, and to love our country and to do well for other people. Thank you.
Presidente.